Number 1. Zephany Nurse. On 27th April 1997, Celeste Nurse delivered a baby girl via cesarean section at Groot Shore Hospital. 2 days later, a woman disguised in nurse's uniform took the infant and escaped with her. The hospital immediately contacted the police. However, only a few untraceable items were found, including Zephany's baby nest, a baby garment, and a handbag with no identifiable items. A pillow was later discovered in a tunnel that gave women in labor direct access to the ward from the street. At the time, police believed someone pretending to be pregnant had stolen Zephany. For 17 years, Zephany's biological parents, Morne and Celeste, held on to hope that their daughter would be found. They spent the next few years trying to raise awareness about their kidnapped daughter in the media, but to no avail. Zephany's biological parents went on to have another daughter, CASSIDY, 4 years later. In 2015, CASSIDY began to attend a new school and met a girl 4 years her senior. The two girls were remarkably similar in appearance and formed an immediate friendship despite the 4-year gap between them. The fellow classmates also noticed a strong resemblance between the two girls. When CASSIDY told her father about the girl who closely resembled her, he set up a meeting between the two to see for himself. After meeting the girl and seeing the striking resemblance, her father alerted the police to his suspicions that the girl was his lost daughter Zephany. Zephany's parents could not provide any proof that she belonged to them, so DNA tests were conducted, which confirmed that Zephany was indeed the nurse's long-lost daughter. In March 2016, the woman who raised Zephany, whose identity remains a secret to protect the girl's true identity, was arrested for kidnapping. In August 2016, she was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The sentenced woman's husband had no idea Zephany was not his biological child. For her part, Zephany said she can't dismiss the only people she knew as her parents for almost 2 decades. During the trial and after the sentencing, Zephany chose to live with her adoptive father. Zephany said she felt distraught that her kidnapper and adoptive mother was arrested and charged with a serious crime. Zephany also said that despite the kidnapping, her adoptive parents raised her well. As of now, the nurse family is still waiting for their chance to catch up with Zephany. Number 2. Charles Frederick Herschel. In the evening of July 22, 1933, one of Oklahoma's wealthiest men, Charles Frederick Herschel, and another oilman, Walter Jarrett, were playing cards on the porch of Herschel's home in Oklahoma City, when 2 men armed with a machine gun drove up and forced Herschel and Jarrett to enter their car. They robbed Jarrett and set him free, but Herschel was to remain their captive for 9 days. The kidnappers took every precaution to make sure they wouldn't get caught. They kept Herschel blindfolded at all times, and even filled his ears with cotton and put tape over them. Taken to a Texas hideout, Herschel was forced to write a ransom note a few days later. The kidnappers demanded $200,000, which was to be delivered by E. Kirkpatrick of Oklahoma City. They also asked Tulsa oilman John H. CATLETT to act as a negotiator with the kidnappers. The kidnappers forced them to go through an elaborate series of steps to deliver the money. First, they asked John to place a fake ad for a farm in daily Oklahoman newspaper, after which they would send him the exact place to deliver the money. The ad was inserted. On July 28, an envelope addressed to the Daily Oklahoman was received, asking Kirkpatrick to pack $200,000 in genuine used Federal Reserve currency in the denomination of $20 bills, after which he was to take a train to Kansas City at 10:10 p.m. and check into Muleback Hotel under the name of E. Kincaid of Little Rock, Arkansas, and wait there for further instructions. After Kirkpatrick reached the hotel, he was instructed to leave the Muleback Hotel in a taxi cab and proceed to the LaSalle Hotel and walk west a block or two. Accordingly, Kirkpatrick took the bag containing the $200,000, arriving at the LaSalle Hotel at about 6 p.m. He walked west. After proceeding no more than half a block, he observed a man approaching him, who, upon reaching Kirkpatrick, said, "Mr. Kincaid, I will take that bag," and reached out and took it. The man who had taken the bag told Kirkpatrick to return to the hotel and Herschel would be returned within the specified time. Kirkpatrick was probably expecting a simple ransom note, not a freaking RPG strategy guide. Herschel was freed 3 days later with $10 in his pocket for a cab fare. Despite being rendered blind, half-deaf, and sleep-deprived, Herschel kept track of every detail. He was interviewed by the FBI and was able to provide a detailed statement on his kidnapping. Herschel stated that immediately after Jarrett's release, one of the men produced some cotton, a short bandage, and adhesive tape, and he was blindfolded. Approximately 1 hour after being blindfolded, the car passed through either 2 small oil fields or the end of 2 large fields. He said he could smell gas and hear the oil pumps working. He also remembered the exact times when planes flew overhead and even how many steps they made him take. He also provided approximate time between these landmarks, which enabled FBI agents to estimate the distance between them and cross-reference Herschel's recollection with the maps of the nearby areas. With the information submitted by Herschel that airplanes flew over one of the houses at approximately 9:45 a.m. and 5:45 p.m. daily, a review was made of all airplane schedules within a radius of 600 miles of Oklahoma City. A check of the Fort Worth to Amarillo line of American Airways disclosed that a plane left Fort Worth daily at 9:15 a.m. and Amarillo, Texas at 3:30 p.m. From this information, it was determined that these 2 planes would be in the vicinity of Paradise, Texas between 9:40 and 9:45 a.m. and between 5:40 and 5:45 p.m. A check of the suspects who had been under investigation by the Bureau disclosed that Shannon, Catherine Kelly's mother, lived near Paradise. The FBI carried out a raid on her house, and George "Machine Gun" Kelly Barnes, an infamous gangster, George's wife, Catherine Kelly, and several others were arrested and sentenced to life imprisonment. In 2012, Danish police officers arrested a sex offender and found child pornography on his computer. In order to find the person who actually took the photographs, photos recovered from the computer were handed off to the Homeland Security Investigations Cybercrime Center. The officers examined the images and found a detail that could help catch one of the photographers. In a bathroom, the predator had placed a child on the counter to take photograph of his evil acts. In the background of the photo, there were products, including prescription medication. But zooming in on that pill bottle made the details unreadable. So the investigators, utilizing some technology that hadn't been released to the public, were able to take a look at the bottle and reverse out some of the motion blur to reveal the photographer's first name, the first 2 letters of his surname, and the first 3 digits on the prescription order. Detectives then used that information to find the owner of the bottle, named Stephen Keating. However, there was still not enough evidence to prove that Stephen took the photos. Perhaps he lent the bottle to a friend, or maybe the real child pornographer had stolen the bottle. Luckily, another recovered image from the same photo shoot included a grown man's fingers. The officers boosted the contrast in the image before running the visible fingerprints through a federal fingerprint database until they found an accurate and perfect match to Stephen. On November 15, special agents arrested Stephen Keating from Jessup, Georgia, and rescued 3 abused children, 2 girls ages 2 and 6, and a 12-year-old boy. Evidence presented at his hearing showed that between 2009 and 2011, Keating repeatedly sexually molested 3 children under the age of 12 to create pictures and videos, and then distributed the images of the abuse. In addition to these 3 children, further investigation following Keating's guilty plea revealed that Keating sexually molested 12 minor victims whose abuse was not captured on film. Stephen was sentenced to 110 years in federal prison. Number 4. Denise Johnson. In May 1992, a body of a woman, later identified as Denise Johnson, was found outdoors in the brush near some Palo Verde trees in Maricopa County, Arizona. Her clothes were scattered around the area, and she had been bound with a cloth and braided wire. It appeared that she was murdered and left at the location very recently. A pager belonging to a man named Mark Bogan was found near the body. Police questioned Mark, and he claimed that he picked up Denise hitchhiking and that they had consensual sex, but claimed he had made her get out of the truck after they had argued. She had apparently stolen his pager. He denied ever being at the crime scene and denied killing her. While going over the crime scene, the investigators looked at the surrounding trees and noticed a scrape on a branch of a tree. The investigators then remembered that 2 small seed pods from that species of tree had been found at the back of Bogan's truck. However, since the tree was fairly common in the area, it wasn't enough to tie Bogan to the crime. Police decided to obtain the assistance of plant molecular genetics specialist Dr. Timothy Helen Jarris of the University of Arizona, who could compare the DNA profile of the seed pods recovered from the suspect's pickup with those of the trees in the vicinity of the crime scene. Timothy created a whole genetic database of the trees found in that area and was able to prove that DNA of the seed pods in Bogan's truck was a perfect match for the DNA of the scraped tree. Prosecutors also said that the tree's trunk contained a scar consistent with being hit by Bogan's truck. Bogan was convicted and sentenced to life in prison in the first murder case in the US that involved plant DNA. Number 5. Catherine Eastburn. In 1985, Gary and Catherine Eastburn lived in Fayetteville, North Carolina with their 3 daughters, Cara, Erin, and Jana. Gary was a captain in the Air Force, and he had orders to relocate to another country. Before the family's planned departure, they decided to find a new home for their dog. An Army Sergeant, Timothy HENNIS, responded to their ad in the newspaper. In early May 1985, HENNIS met with Catherine at her house to adopt their dog. On May 12, 1985, a neighbor, aware that Gary was attending a squadron officers training school in Montgomery, Alabama, noticed that a few newspapers had not been picked up at their house, and he had not seen anyone enter or leave the Eastburn residence in days. Concerned about the well-being of the family, the neighbor went to the front door to check on them. From outside the house, the neighbor heard a baby crying. When he knocked on the door and no one answered, the neighbor called the police. When police entered the house, they found Catherine raped and stabbed to death. 2 of her daughters, Cara and Erin, had also been brutally murdered. The 22-month-old baby Jana was still alive but severely dehydrated just hours from death. The authorities believed they were killed on the night of May 9 or in the early morning hours of May 10. The killer had attempted to clean up the crime scene, but there was just too much blood. Nothing was stolen from the house except a small amount of cash and an ATM card. During the investigations, a man named Patrick Cohn said that he had seen a man leaving the residence 3 nights ago, which would have been the same night of the murders. He told them that the man got his white Chevette and drove off. According to Patrick, the man was approximately 6'4" with blonde hair, wearing a dark members-only jacket atop a white shirt and a blue jeans. Based on this witness description of the suspect, a police artist drew a sketch of the man's face. Following the news coverage of the triple murder, Sergeant HENNIS voluntarily paid a visit to the police station. He told detectives that when he saw a photograph of Catherine Eastburn on the television, he realized she was the woman from whom he had recently purchased the dog. He fully cooperated with the law enforcement and answered all of their questions. According to HENNIS, he never entered the Eastburn residence and only spoke to Catherine from the porch. However, HENNIS became a prime suspect in the case when it was found that he closely resembled the sketch, had just taken a dark members-only jacket to a dry cleaner, and also drove a white Chevette. Two neighbors also claimed that they saw a man matching the same description walking down the Eastburn street around the time of the murders. The police also discovered two $150 withdrawals tied to the missing ATM card. Witness Lucille Cook said she saw a man matching HENNIS's description use the same ATM around the time Eastburn's card was used. Cook also identified HENNIS from a photo lineup. According to the prosecutors, HENNIS and his wife were separating and that he was having money problems. On that day, he tried to have sex with Catherine, but when Catherine rejected his sexual advances, he flew into rage and murdered her and her two children. In 1986, HENNIS was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. However, because the evidence against HENNIS had been very circumstantial, his attorneys were able to get him a retrial 3 years later. This time, HENNIS was acquitted, and he resumed his career in the army. He retired from the army in 2004. But the story doesn't end there. In 2006, DNA testing was performed on semen samples acquired from the crime scene, which conclusively matched Timothy HENNIS. Unfortunately, HENNIS had already been tried and acquitted for the murders. Therefore, double jeopardy prevented prosecutors from trying him again. Double jeopardy prevents an accused person from being tried again for the same or similar charges following an acquittal or conviction. The authorities devised a way around double jeopardy. The army forced HENNIS to reactivate and then charged him with the murders in military court. In April of 2010, the jury found HENNIS guilty of 3 counts of premeditated murder and sentenced him to death for the same crime twice. He currently sits on death row at Fort Leavenworth.